The alarm did not give me time to think. Red light spilled across the corridor walls, and a voice above me shouted words I did not understand, though the tone needed no translation. Something was wrong, and I was standing right in the middle of it. My name is Daniel Hart, and 3 minutes earlier I had been a nobody. A repair technician sent to fix a broken translator panel outside a room I was told never to enter. That was the whole job. Walk in, fix the panel, walk out, go back to my bunk and eat cold rations like every other night on this station. Nobody warned me that the floor outside that room would be wet from condensation, or that my boot would slide the second I stepped near the railing, or that my hand would shoot out on instinct and grab the only thing close enough to catch me. That thing was not a railing. It was the wrist of Cialara, princess of the Vecthari ascendancy, lying in what her people called a vigil chamber. I did not know her name yet. I did not know she was dying. All I knew was that I had grabbed something warm, something that should not have been warm, and that guards twice my height were now pointing weapons at my head and screaming. I raised both hands slowly, though one of them was still tingling from where I had touched her skin. My mind was doing the thing minds do when they are seconds from disaster, replaying the last few moments over and over, searching for some version where I had not just placed my bare hand on a member of an alien royal family who was, by every visible sign, already dead. She did not look like someone sleeping. Her skin, which I would later learn was supposed to glow faintly with a soft blue and gold light, was completely dark, the color of wet ash. Tubes ran from a machine beside her into ports along her arms. Her chest barely moved. I had seen enough medical dramas back on Earth to recognize the look of someone on the edge, and this was that look, dressed in silver robes and surrounded by machines I could not name. A guard grabbed my shoulder and wrenched me backward, away from the railing, away from her. I did not resist. There was no version of resisting that ended well for me. My translator earpiece struggled to keep up with the shouting, spitting out fragments. Contamination. Breach. Seize him. I opened my mouth to explain that I had only slipped, that I meant no harm, that I did not even know where I was supposed to be standing when the room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that happens when 40 people stop breathing at the same moment. I turned my head, still pinned by the guard's grip, and saw why. Her skin was glowing. It started at her wrist, right where my hand had been, a thin line of blue light spreading outward like water soaking into dry cloth. Then her fingers curled, slowly, the first movement I had seen from her since I arrived. A monitor beside the chamber began beeping in a new rhythm, faster, stronger, and one of the medical staff let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a cry. The guard holding me loosened his grip, not out of mercy, but confusion. He was staring at her the same way I was. An older Vecthari man in dark green robes shoved past 2 guards and reached the chamber, pressing something against her throat that clicked and hummed. He looked at the readout, looked at her glowing skin, then turned and looked directly at me with wide, pale eyes. I have replayed that look many times since. It was not anger. It was not gratitude either. Not yet. It was the look of a man watching something happen that his entire understanding of the universe said was impossible. "What did you do?" he said, and my earpiece translated it flat and toneless, though nothing about his voice had been flat. "I slipped," I said. My voice cracked halfway through the sentence, which did nothing for my credibility. "I grabbed the railing. I did not know she was there. I am sorry. I did not mean to touch her. I was just trying not to fall." He did not answer right away. He did not answer right away. He turned back to the chamber, running his hands over instruments I did not recognize, muttering words too fast for my earpiece to catch cleanly. More staff arrived, crowding around the princess, checking readings, whispering to each other in urgent bursts. I stood there, still held loosely by the guard, watching a scene I had no part in and yet had somehow caused. The light along her arm had spread further now, reaching her shoulder, faint traces of gold appearing beneath the blue. Her breathing had changed. Even I could see that much. It was deeper now, steadier, like someone climbing back up from somewhere very deep and very dark. "She has been fading for 6 days," a voice said beside me. I turned to find a younger Vekthari woman in a physician's uniform, her eyes fixed on the readouts rather than on me. Nothing we tried slowed it. Nothing. "I only touched her wrist," I said, because it seemed important that someone understand I had not performed some secret miracle on purpose. For maybe 2 seconds, then the guards pulled me back. 2 seconds, she repeated, and something in her voice had shifted from clinical to unsettled. 2 seconds undid 6 days. I did not know what to say to that. I was still trying to process the fact that I was standing in a royal medical chamber, having apparently caused either a disaster or a miracle, and I genuinely could not tell which one the room believed it was yet. The older man in green robes straightened up from the chamber and turned to face me fully. His expression had changed again, the confusion replaced by something sharper, more focused, like a man who had just found the missing piece of a puzzle he had been staring at for days. "Bring him to the examination room," he said to the guards. "Do not harm him. Do not let him leave the station. And someone contact the king. Now." The guard's hand tightened on my arm again, but this time it felt less like an arrest and more like an escort. I was walked out of the chamber, past rows of Vekthari staff who stared at me with an expression I had never had directed at me before, somewhere between fear and disbelief. I looked back once, before the doors closed behind me. The princess's eyes were still shut, but her skin now glowed steadily along one whole arm, soft blue light pulsing gently in time with her heartbeat. I had come to this station to fix a broken translator panel. Instead, I had apparently just broken every rule the Vekthari ascendancy had about who was allowed to touch royalty, and possibly saved the life of a princess I had never even met. The walk to the examination room felt longer than it should have. My mind kept circling back to the same question, over and over. Why had it worked? What was it about my hand, my skin, that had done in 2 seconds what their entire medical staff could not do in 6 days? I did not have an answer. I was not a doctor. I was not a scientist. I fixed broken panels and ate cold rations and counted down the days until my contract ended and I could go home. None of that mattered anymore. Something had happened back in that chamber, something none of us fully understood yet. And whether I liked it or not, I was now at the center of it. The guards brought me into a small, sterile room with pale walls and no windows. A single chair sat in the middle, bolted to the floor, and my stomach tightened at the sight of the restraints built into its arms. I was told to sit. I sat. Nobody explained anything. Nobody answered my questions. I asked twice what was going to happen to me, and both times I was met with silence and the low hum of scanning equipment being wheeled into place around me. I sat there for what felt like an hour, watched by 2 guards who never moved and never spoke, while somewhere on this station a princess who had been dying an hour ago was, for reasons none of us understood, waking up. I did not know yet that this moment, sitting alone in a cold examination room with restraints I hoped I would never need, was about to change the rest of my life. I did not know that a king was already being told my name. I did not know that a dying princess had just opened her eyes for the first time in 6 days and asked, in a weak voice, who had touched her. All I knew, sitting in that chair with my hands still faintly tingling, was that I had come here to fix a translator panel, and instead, by pure accident, I had touched something I was never supposed to touch, and the entire Vekthari ascendancy was about to find out exactly what that meant. The scanning equipment around me clicked and whirred for nearly 20 minutes before anyone spoke to me again. I sat perfectly still, partly out of fear and partly because one of the guards had made it very clear with a gesture that stillness was expected. My mind kept drifting back to the chamber, to the way the light had spread across her arm, to the sound the machines made when her heartbeat steadied. I had no explanation for any of it, and the silence in that small white room gave me far too much time to imagine what might happen to someone who had, by accident, interfered with a dying member of an alien royal family. The door finally opened, and the older man in dark green robes walked in, followed by the younger physician who had spoken to me earlier. He was carrying a thin data pad, and his expression had settled into something calmer than before, though still far from relaxed. "I am Karsu," he said, and my earpiece delivered the name flatly, though something in his tone suggested it carried weight among his people. "Chief physician to the royal family. You will answer my questions honestly and quickly, and this will go easier for you." "I have nothing to hide," I said. "I told the guards everything already." I slipped. I grabbed the railing. Her wrist happened to be there. Karsu studied me for a long moment. The way someone studies a puzzle they suspect is simpler than it looks, but cannot yet prove. Then he set the datapad down on a small table beside my chair and turned it so I could see the screen, though none of the symbols on it meant anything to me. "Your species is called human," he said. "Correct." "Yes. And this," he tapped the screen, "is a reading of your skin. Taken while you touched the princess's wrist." I leaned forward slightly, though I still could not read the display. "What does it say?" "It says," Karsu replied slowly, "that your skin produces a compound our scanners have never recorded before. A combination of oils and enzymes present on nearly every human being, according to the medical archive we consulted after you were brought here." I frowned. "That is just sweat. And skin oil. Everyone has that. It is nothing special. We barely think about it." The younger physician, standing near the door, let out a short breath that might have been a laugh if the situation had allowed for one. "Nothing special," she repeated quietly, as if the words themselves were strange to her. Karsu ignored her and continued. "The compound your skin produces, this thing you call nothing special, is a near-perfect neutralizer for the toxin that has been killing Princess of Silera for the past 11 days. 6 of those days, she has been in the vigil chamber, unresponsive, while every treatment we developed failed to slow her decline." I sat back in the chair, trying to absorb what he was telling me. "You are saying my hand cured her." "I am saying your hand did in 2 seconds what our entire medical division could not do in 6 days, Karsu said. "Whether that qualifies as a cure remains to be seen. She is stable now. She is awake. But we do not yet know why, and until we understand why, we cannot be certain the effect will last." The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in with the weight of what he had just said. I had come to this station to fix a translator panel. Now I was being told that my skin, something I had never once thought about beyond washing my hands before meals, contained a chemical that could apparently reverse a fatal poisoning in an alien princess. "How did she get poisoned in the first place?" I asked, mostly to give my brain something to focus on, other than the growing unease building in my chest. Karsu's expression flickered, just slightly. "That is not information I am authorized to share with you." "Fair enough," I said, though the way he had answered made me suspect the poisoning had not been an accident, and that thought settled into my stomach like a stone. If someone had deliberately poisoned a member of the royal family, then my accidental involvement in saving her was not just strange, it was dangerous. The younger physician stepped forward, finally introducing herself. "My name is Rena," she said. "I have been studying human biology since your species first made contact with the Ascendancy 3 cycles ago. I have read every medical file your government shared with us. Nothing prepared me for this." "What exactly is this?" I asked. "You keep saying the compound, but what does it actually do?" Rena glanced at Karsu, who gave a small nod, apparently granting permission for her to explain. She pulled up a different display on the datapad, one showing a simplified diagram of a molecule, twisting slowly on the screen. "Your species evolved on a world with a very different chemical environment than ours," she said. "Over countless generations, your skin developed natural defenses against microorganisms, irritants, and certain toxins found in your environment. These defenses became so common, so universal among your species, that you no longer think of them as remarkable. You call it sweat. You call it oil. To you, it is background noise, something you barely notice unless it is inconvenient. But to you, I said slowly, beginning to understand, it looks like medicine. It looks like medicine we have never had access to, Rena said. Our species evolved differently. Our bodies do not produce anything similar. When we are exposed to toxins, injuries, illnesses, we rely entirely on technology to treat them, because our biology offers us almost nothing on its own. We have never needed to develop what you call an immune response of this kind, because our environment did not demand it in the same way. I sat with that for a moment, trying to picture an entire species without something as basic as what my own body did automatically, without thought, every single day. It was strange to imagine, and stranger still to realize, that the very thing I found unremarkable was, to them, something bordering on impossible. So what happens now? I asked. Am I some kind of prisoner? A specimen? Karsu's jaw tightened slightly at the word specimen, and for a moment I worried I had said something wrong. You are neither, he said. You are a guest who has, through pure accident, become extremely important to this station and to the royal family. That importance comes with complications I do not think you fully understand yet. Then help me understand, I said. Because right now, I feel like I walked into a room to fix a panel and woke up in the middle of a situation I have no context for. Rena and Karsu exchanged another look, longer this time, some silent conversation passing between them that I could not follow. Finally, Karsu spoke again, his voice lower, more careful. The princess has requested to meet you. Whatever I had expected him to say, it was not that. Meet me? Why? I thought I was supposed to stay away from her. Under normal circumstances, that would remain true, Karsu said. Physical contact between an outsider and a member of the royal family is forbidden by law and by custom, except in very specific, sanctioned circumstances. What you did, however accidental, violated that law in the most literal sense. My stomach dropped. Am I in trouble because of that? You would be, Karsu said, if the outcome had been anything other than what it was. Vekthari law makes exceptions for actions that save a life, even when those actions break other laws in the process. The princess is alive because of what you did. That fact protects you, for now. For now, I repeated, not liking the sound of that at all. The law protects your body from punishment, Karsu said. It does not yet tell us what to do with the rest of this situation. A human touched royalty and reversed a fatal poisoning by accident. That is not something our legal system, our medical understanding, or our political structure was built to handle. Rena set the datapad down and folded her hands in front of her, studying me with an expression that had shifted from clinical curiosity into something closer to genuine interest. May I ask you something, Daniel Hart? I blinked at the use of my full name, surprised they had already looked it up. Sure. Does it not frighten you, she asked, that your own body carries something capable of this, and you never knew? I thought about the question for a moment longer than I expected to. I guess I never had a reason to think about it, I said honestly. Where I come from, this kind of thing, oils, sweat, whatever you want to call it, it is just part of being human. Nobody studies their own skin and thinks, this could save someone's life someday. You just live your life and your body does its thing in the background. That, Rena said quietly, is exactly what unsettles us most. Before I could ask what she meant, the door opened again, and a guard leaned in, speaking rapidly to Karsu in a tone that carried clear urgency. Karsu's expression shifted immediately, the calm authority replaced by something sharper, more alert. What is it? I asked, though nobody answered me directly. Karsu turned back to me, his eyes narrowing slightly. The king has been informed of everything that happened in the vigil chamber. He is on his way here now, personally, to see you. The king? I repeated, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. As in, the actual king of the Vecthari Ascendancy is coming here, to this room, to see me. Yes, Karsu said, and I would advise you to prepare yourself, because what happens in the next few minutes will likely determine far more about your future than you currently realize. I felt my pulse pick up, the same nervous energy from the vigil chamber returning in full force. I had gone from fixing a broken translator panel to accidentally saving a princess's life to now apparently being summoned by a king I had never even seen a picture of, all within the span of a single afternoon. Rena gave me a small, almost sympathetic look before stepping back toward the door. For what it is worth, she said quietly, whatever happens next, know that what you did today, even by accident, was extraordinary. Our people do not use that word lightly. I wanted to feel reassured by that. Instead, as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from somewhere down the corridor outside, heavier and more deliberate than any I had heard yet on this station, all I felt was the growing certainty that my life, the simple, uneventful life I had known before today, was about to change in ways I could not yet begin to predict. The door swung open fully, and every guard in the room straightened at once, snapping into a posture of rigid respect. I rose from the chair on instinct, though my legs felt unsteady beneath me, and turned to face whoever was about to walk through that door. The man who entered the room did not look the way I expected a king to look. There was no crown, no ceremonial robe dragging along the floor, no procession of attendants announcing his arrival. He wore a simple dark uniform, close-fitted, with a single silver band around his upper arm as the only visible mark of his rank. He was tall, taller than Karsu, with pale gray eyes that swept across the room and settled directly on me the moment he crossed the threshold. I did not know what the correct etiquette was for meeting an alien king. Nobody had given me instructions, so I did the only thing that felt right in the moment. I stood as straight as I could and gave a small, awkward bow, unsure if that gesture meant anything to his people at all. He studied me for a long, silent moment before speaking. "You are the human who touched my daughter." "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "King Doran, I am sorry, I did not mean any disrespect. I slipped. I was trying to catch myself, and her wrist was there. I never intended to touch her, and I certainly never intended to break any laws." Something flickered across his face, and for a moment, I thought I had made things worse. Then, unexpectedly, the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "Karsu tells me she is awake," he said, speaking, asking for food, which she has not done in 6 days. "That is what I have been told as well," I said carefully. The king walked further into the room, his gaze never leaving me, studying me the way someone studies a stranger who has just done something they cannot fully explain. "Do you understand what you have done, human?" "Honestly," I said, "not entirely. I have been given some explanations about my skin, about a compound, about the toxin, but I do not think I fully understand the size of what happened." "No," the king said quietly, "I do not think you do. Let me help you understand." He gestured, and Karsu stepped forward, offering the datapad. The king took it, tapped something on the screen, and turned it toward me. It showed a simple graph, a line that had been falling steadily for days, dropping lower and lower before spiking sharply upward at a single point. "This is her condition over the past 11 days, the king said. "Every treatment we tried slowed the decline for a few hours, perhaps a day, before the toxin adapted and resumed its course. Our physicians, our scientists, our finest medical technology, all of it together bought her time, but none of it stopped what was happening inside her body." He tapped the spike on the graph. "This is the moment you touched her wrist." I stared at the sudden, dramatic change in the line, the way it shot upward like something breaking free after being held underwater. "I did not know any of that was happening," I said quietly. "I did not even know her name until Karsu told me." "And yet you saved her life," the king said, "by accident. without knowing who she was, without understanding what your own body was capable of, without any intention beyond catching yourself from a fall. I did not know how to respond to that, so I said nothing, and the silence stretched between us until the king finally set the datapad down and studied me with an expression I could not fully read. "Among my people," he said slowly, "touch carries meaning. It is not casual. We do not shake hands in greeting the way I am told your species does. Physical contact is reserved for family, for bonded partners, for healers performing sanctioned treatment. To touch a member of the royal family without permission, without ceremony, is considered one of the gravest violations in our society." My stomach tightened. "I understand if there needs to be some kind of consequence," I said, though the words felt heavy leaving my mouth. "I am not trying to avoid responsibility. I just want you to know it truly was an accident." The king raised a hand, and I stopped talking immediately. "I am not here to punish you," he said. "I am here because my daughter is alive, and 11 days ago, every physician in this ascendancy believed she would not survive the week. You changed that, whether you intended to or not, and I do not know how to properly honor an act like that, because nothing like it has happened in the history of our people." I blinked, caught off guard by the shift in his tone. "Honor me?" "You misunderstand my hesitation," the king continued. "It is not that I doubt your intentions were innocent. It is that what you represent, a species whose bodies apparently carry solutions to problems we have never been able to solve, is something my advisors, my scientists, my entire government will need time to comprehend. There will be those among my court who see this as a gift. There will be others who see it as a threat." "A threat," I repeated. "How could this possibly be a threat?" The king's eyes narrowed slightly, not at me, but at something beyond me, some larger concern I was only beginning to glimpse. "Because power in this ascendancy has always been tied to what our physicians can and cannot do. If a single human, an untrained repair technician with no medical knowledge whatsoever, can accomplish in seconds what our finest healers could not accomplish in days, then questions will be asked. About the limits of our own medicine, about what else your species might be capable of that we do not yet understand, about what it means for the balance between our people and yours. I had not considered any of this. I had been so focused on the immediate fear of punishment, of being blamed, that I had not stopped to think about the larger implications of what had happened, the political weight that a single accidental touch could carry across an entire alien society. "I did not come here to change anything," I said quietly. "I just wanted to fix a translator panel and go home." For the first time since entering the room, something close to a smile crossed the king's face, faint and brief, but genuine. "I believe that," he said, "which, strangely enough, makes this entire situation both easier and more complicated at the same time." Before I could ask what he meant, the door opened once more, and this time it was not a guard or a physician who entered, but a young woman, moving with a careful, deliberate slowness, as though her body had not yet fully remembered how to move on its own. Her skin glowed faintly, soft traces of blue and gold visible along her arms and the edges of her face, and though she looked exhausted, there was an unmistakable alertness in her eyes that had not been there in the vigil chamber. "Father," she said, her voice quiet but clear, "you left before I could finish speaking with you." The king turned, and for the first time since he had entered the room, his rigid composure cracked entirely, replaced by something raw and unguarded. "Silara, you should be resting." "I have been resting for 6 days," she said, a faint edge of dry humor in her tone despite everything. "I would like to meet the man who apparently interrupted that particular arrangement." Every guard in the room straightened further, if that was even possible, and Karsu moved quickly to her side, offering a supportive arm which she accepted, though I got the sense she did not truly need it, more that she was allowing him the comfort of feeling useful. Her eyes found mine, and I felt an unexpected wave of nervousness wash over me, far more intense than anything I had felt while dealing with guards or physicians or even the king himself. There was something deeply personal about standing in front of the person whose life I had, without knowing it, saved. "You are the one," she said. It was not quite a question. "Daniel Hart," I said, offering a small nod, since I still did not trust myself to attempt whatever the correct greeting gesture might be. "I am sorry, Princess. I never meant to touch you." "It was an accident. I slipped, and I know," she interrupted gently. "My father has already explained the details to me, as has Karsu. I did not come here to hear another apology, Daniel Hart. I came here because I wanted to see, with my own eyes, the person who apparently defeated a poison that 11 days of our best medicine could not." I did not know what to say to that, so I said the only honest thing I could think of. I did not do anything, not really. I did not even know what was happening until it was already over. If anything deserves credit, it is whatever is inside my own skin, not me. She studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, before something shifted in her eyes, a flicker of amusement mixed with genuine curiosity. "That is a strange thing to say. Most people, upon being told they saved a life, would accept the credit rather than deflect it onto their own biology." "I guess I just do not feel like I earned it," I said. "It was luck. Bad luck that I slipped. Good luck that it happened to help you instead of hurt you." "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps luck is simply a word we use for things we do not yet understand well enough to explain properly." The king watched this exchange with an expression I could not fully place, somewhere between protective concern and quiet fascination, as if he too was trying to understand what exactly was unfolding in front of him. "Karsu tells me," the princess continued, turning her attention back toward the physician standing beside her, "that the compound in his skin has already begun to fade from my bloodstream, that whatever protection it offered may not be permanent." Karsu nodded gravely. "That is correct, Princess. The toxin has been neutralized for now, but we do not yet know if it has been fully purged from your system or if it will begin to regenerate once the compound's effects diminish." The room went quiet at that, the weight of the statement settling over everyone present. I felt my stomach drop again, the brief relief I had allowed myself evaporating instantly. "You are saying she could get sick again," I said. "It is possible," Karsu admitted. "We do not yet have enough understanding of the compound to know how long its effects last, or whether repeated exposure would be required to fully eliminate the toxin from her system." The princess's expression remained calm, composed, though I noticed her hand tighten slightly against Karsu's arm. "Then it seems," she said slowly, looking directly at me again, "that our situation is far from resolved." The king stepped forward, his voice taking on a new weight, a decision forming behind his eyes, even as he spoke. "Daniel Hart, I must ask something of you, and I want you to understand you are within your rights to refuse." I swallowed hard. "What is it?" "I need you to remain on this station," he said, "at least until our physicians can determine whether the effects of your touch were a permanent cure or merely a temporary reprieve. If it is the latter, and the toxin begins to return, you may be the only thing standing between my daughter and the death she narrowly escaped just hours ago." I looked from the king to Karsu to the princess herself, whose pale eyes held mine with a quiet, searching intensity that I found harder to look away from than I expected. I thought about my contract, my simple job fixing panels, my plans to finish my rotation and go home without any complications. None of that seemed to matter anymore. "I will stay," I said, and the moment the words left my mouth, I felt the full, undeniable weight of what I had just agreed to settle over me, heavier than anything a broken translator panel could ever have prepared me for. 3 days passed before I understood just how quickly news could travel across the stars. I had assumed, foolishly, that what happened in that vigil chamber would remain contained to the station, a strange private incident between myself, the royal family, and a handful of physicians sworn to discretion. I learned how wrong that assumption was the moment Karsu walked into the small guest quarters I had been given, his expression tighter than I had seen it since the day we first met. "You need to see this," he said, holding out a datapad without further explanation. I took it from him, expecting another chart, another reading of my blood work, something clinical and familiar by now after 3 days of tests. Instead, the screen showed what looked unmistakably like a news broadcast, alien text scrolling beneath an image that made my chest tighten the moment I recognized it. It was the vigil chamber, grainy, clearly captured from some kind of security footage, but unmistakable. And there, at the edge of the frame, was me, arm outstretched, hand on the princess's wrist. "How is this public?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. "We do not know," Karsu admitted. "Someone leaked the footage, likely a member of the staff present that day, though we have not yet identified who. It has spread across 3 allied systems in less than 2 days." I stared at the screen, watching the same moment replay over and over, my accidental slip immortalized and broadcast to who knew how many worlds. "What are they saying about it?" Karsu hesitated, which told me more than any answer could have. "The reactions are varied," he said carefully. "Some see it as proof of what they call the miracle of human biology. Others see it as evidence that your species holds a dangerous advantage, one that was hidden from the rest of the galaxy until now." "I did not hide anything," I said. "I did not even know." "I know that," Karsu said, "but perception moves faster than truth, Daniel Hart. And right now, perception is spreading in directions none of us can control." Over the following days, I began to understand exactly what he meant. Requests started arriving at the station, first a trickle, then a flood, from representatives of other species within the Ascendancy's sphere of influence. Some wanted samples of human tissue for study. Others wanted human volunteers sent to their own medical facilities. A few, more troubling than the rest, wanted to know if humans could be, in their words, deployed as a treatment for specific ailments plaguing their own royal families or leadership figures. I sat in on one of these discussions, at Karsu's insistence, though I contributed little beyond confused silence, as delegates from a species I had never encountered before, tall and thin with silvery skin, debated among themselves in rapid, clipped tones about the medical and political implications of what they kept calling the human discovery. "They speak as though I am a resource," I said quietly to Rena afterward, as we walked back through the station's long, curved corridors. "Not a person." "I noticed that as well," Rena admitted. "It concerns me too. Karsu has been pushing back against the more extreme requests, but he cannot hold back all of them forever, especially not with pressure coming from multiple allied governments at once." "What kind of pressure?" Rena hesitated, glancing around the corridor as though checking for anyone who might overhear. "There are factions within our own court who believe the discovery of your biology should be treated as a matter of galactic security. They argue that human physiology, if it truly holds unknown medical properties beyond what we have already seen, should be studied extensively, regardless of individual human consent." A cold unease settled over me at those words. Studied, regardless of consent. That sounds a lot like what I would call being a prisoner. "I understand your concern," Rena said, "and for what it is worth, I do not agree with that faction. Neither does Karsu, and neither, from what I understand, does the king himself. But their voices are growing louder, and the longer this story spreads uncontrolled across allied systems, the harder it becomes to keep them contained." I thought about home then, about Earth, about the simple, mundane life I had left behind to take a repair contract that was supposed to last 6 months and then end quietly, without incident. I wondered if anyone back home even knew what was happening out here, if my own government understood the position I had accidentally found myself in. "Does Earth know about this?" I asked. "Your government has been informed," Rena said. "Officially, they have requested regular updates on your condition and your treatment." Unofficially, I understand there is significant concern among your diplomatic representatives about what this discovery might mean for future relations between our peoples. Concern how? Rena's expression turned careful again, the same measured caution I was beginning to recognize whenever she was about to share something uncomfortable. If other species come to believe human biology holds valuable medical secrets, there is a risk that humans could be seen less as partners in this alliance, and more as, forgive the phrasing, a resource to be acquired. The word acquired sat heavily in my stomach, and I did not respond right away, letting the weight of what she had said settle over me as we continued walking. I thought about the delegates I had just watched, discussing my species in the same clinical tone Karsu might use to discuss a rare mineral deposit, and I felt, for the first time since arriving on this station, a genuine fear that had nothing to do with punishment or blame, and everything to do with what my presence here might mean for every human who came after me. That evening, I was summoned again, this time not to a medical examination room, but to a private chamber within the royal wing of the station, smaller and quieter than anywhere I had been taken before. The princess was waiting when I arrived, seated near a wide window that looked out over the curve of the station and the stars beyond it, her glow steadier now than it had been even a few days earlier. "You look troubled," she said, without turning from the window. "I have had a difficult few days," I admitted, taking the seat she gestured toward. "It seems what happened between us is no longer a private matter." "No," she agreed, "it is not. I am sorry for that. I did not intend for your act of saving my life to become a source of danger for your own people." "It is not your fault," I said. "None of this is anyone's fault, really. It was an accident from the very beginning." She finally turned to face me, her pale eyes carrying an expression I had not seen from her before, something closer to genuine worry than the composed curiosity she had shown in our earlier meetings. "My father has been fielding requests from 3 different systems in the past 2 days alone, all wanting access to you, to your biology, to whatever knowledge might be extracted from studying you further. He has refused each one, but the pressure will not ease on its own." "What happens if he cannot refuse forever?" I asked quietly. "I do not know," she admitted. "This has never happened before, Daniel Hart. There is no precedent for a discovery like this, no established law or tradition to guide us. We are, all of us, improvising as we go." I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. "That is not exactly comforting." A faint, tired smile crossed her face. "No, I imagine it is not." She paused, studying me for a long moment before continuing. "May I ask you something honestly?" "Of course." "Do you regret it?" she asked, touching me, saving my life. "If you had known, in that moment, everything it would set into motion, would you still have reached out to catch yourself?" I considered the question carefully, because it deserved a careful answer, not a quick, easy reassurance. "I have thought about that a lot, actually, these past few days," I said. "And honestly, no, I do not regret it. You are alive because of something my body did without me even trying. Whatever complications come from that, whatever pressure or danger it creates, I cannot bring myself to regret the fact that you are sitting here right now, instead of gone." Something in her expression softened at that, the guarded composure she usually carried slipping just slightly. "That is a kind thing to say." "It is just the truth," I said. We sat in silence for a while after that, watching the stars drift slowly past the window, and for the first time since the alarms had first blared through that corridor days earlier, I felt something close to calm settle over me, brief and fragile as it was. It did not last. The chamber door opened sharply, and Karsu entered, his expression grim in a way that immediately extinguished whatever peace had briefly settled over the room. "Princess, Daniel Hart," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "I apologize for the intrusion, but this cannot wait." "What is it?" the princess asked, already rising from her seat. Karsu held up the datapad, his hand not quite steady. "New readings from your last examination. The toxin levels in your bloodstream, they have begun rising again." The room went cold instantly, the fragile calm shattering completely. The princess's face paled, and I felt my own pulse spike, the same rush of adrenaline from the vigil chamber returning full force. "How is that possible?" she asked. "It has only been 3 days." "I do not know," Karsu admitted, "but the pattern is unmistakable. Whatever protection Daniel Hart's touch provided, it is beginning to fade, and if the toxin continues at this rate, we may be looking at a relapse within a matter of days, not weeks." I looked at the princess, watching the fear she was clearly trying to suppress flicker briefly across her face before she forced her composure back into place, and I felt the full weight of the promise I had made to her father settle over me completely. "What do we do?" I asked, though some part of me already suspected I knew the answer and dreaded it in equal measure. Karsu looked between the two of us, his expression grave. "We may need to consider repeated, sustained contact as a form of ongoing treatment, which means, Daniel Hart, that your involvement in this may be far from over." The princess's eyes met mine, and in them I saw a reflection of the same uncertainty churning inside my own chest, the realization that whatever simple life I had once imagined returning to, it was growing further out of reach with every passing hour. Karsu's words hung in the air of that quiet chamber long after he had finished speaking, and for a moment none of us moved, as though acknowledging the weight of what he had just proposed would make it more real than any of us were ready for. "Sustained contact," I repeated slowly. "You mean I would need to keep touching her, regularly?" "It is a theory," Karsu clarified quickly, "not a certainty. We have not tested whether repeated exposure would fully eliminate the toxin or simply delay its return indefinitely. It is possible one further contact, done properly under medical supervision, could finish what the first accidental touch began. It is also possible the toxin has adapted in some way we do not yet understand, and no amount of contact will fully resolve it." The princess had gone very still, her earlier fear replaced by a careful, guarded calm that I was beginning to recognize as her default response to bad news. "Then we test the theory," she said simply. "There is no reason to delay, not with the toxin already rising again." "Princess," Karsu began, "there are protocols that must be followed for sanctioned contact between a member of the royal family and an outsider, even for medical purposes. Your father must approve." "My father is not the one whose bloodstream is currently failing," she interrupted, though not unkindly. "Contact him, explain the situation. I trust he will understand the urgency." Karsu hesitated, then nodded and left the chamber quickly, leaving the two of us alone, once more, with the weight of what had just been decided settling heavily between us. "You do not have to agree to this," the princess said quietly, once the door had closed behind him. "Whatever obligation you feel toward my father's request, this is different. This would mean repeated exposure, an ongoing arrangement, not a single accidental moment." "I already told you I do not regret what happened," I said. "That has not changed just because the stakes are higher now." She studied me for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind her pale eyes. "You barely know me, Daniel Hart. And yet you keep offering yourself up for my sake without hesitation. I find that difficult to understand." "I am not sure I fully understand it myself," I admitted, "but I know what it looked like, watching you in that chamber, dark and still and barely breathing. And I know I would rather deal with whatever complications come from helping you than live with the alternative." Something shifted in her expression then, subtle but unmistakable, a softness that had not been there in our earlier conversations. Before either of us could say anything further, the door opened again, and King Doran entered, his expression carrying the particular exhaustion of a man who had clearly been pulled from other urgent matters to deal with this one. "Karsu has explained the situation," he said without preamble. I have authorized a sanctioned medical contact to take place immediately under full supervision. The relief that washed through me at those words surprised me with its intensity. Then let us do it, I said. Whatever needs to happen, I am ready. The procedure, when it happened, was far less dramatic than the accident that had started everything. I sat beside the princess in a proper medical chamber this time, Karsu and Rena monitoring readings on either side, and at Karsu's careful instruction, I reached out and took her hand, deliberately this time, fully aware of what I was doing and why. Her skin was warm beneath mine, just as it had been that first accidental moment, though this time there was no alarm, no panic, no guards rushing to pull me away, just the quiet hum of monitoring equipment and the steady rhythm of her breathing beside me. I watched the faint blue light spread from her wrist up along her arm, slower this time, more deliberate, as though her body was savoring the process rather than being shocked back to life by it. Karsu's readings shifted steadily, the numbers he had shown me days earlier beginning to fall in the opposite direction, the toxin retreating rather than advancing. "It is working," Rena said quietly, relief evident in her voice. "The levels are dropping." We held that position for nearly 10 minutes, neither of us speaking, simply allowing whatever process was happening between us to run its course. When Karsu finally indicated it was safe to release her hand, I found myself reluctant to do so, though I could not fully explain why. "How do you feel?" I asked, once our hands had finally parted. "Stronger," she said, flexing her fingers slowly, studying the way the blue light pulsed steadily along her skin. "Clearer, somehow, as though something that had been weighing on me for days has finally lifted." Karsu reviewed the latest readings with visible relief, though his expression remained cautious. "The toxin levels have dropped significantly, more than they did during the initial accidental contact. It appears sustained, deliberate contact may indeed be more effective than a brief, unplanned touch." "Does that mean she is cured?" I asked. "Fully, this time?" "We will need to monitor her for several more days to be certain," Karsu said. "But this is the most promising result we have seen since the toxin first appeared in her system." Over the following week, the treatments continued, always brief, always supervised, and each time the toxin levels dropped further, until finally, on the 8th day since that first accidental slip in the corridor, Karsu delivered the news I had been hoping to hear since this entire ordeal began. "The toxin is gone," he announced, studying the final set of readings with an expression of genuine, unguarded relief. "Completely cleared from her system. There is no trace remaining." The princess let out a breath I did not realize she had been holding, and even the king, standing quietly near the back of the room, allowed a small, tired smile to cross his face for the first time since I had met him. "Then it is done," the king said. "My daughter is fully healed, and this ascendancy owes a debt to a human repair technician that I am not entirely certain how to repay." "You do not owe me anything," I said quickly. "I did not do this expecting a reward." "I know that," the king said. "Which is precisely why I intend to offer one anyway." Word of the successful cure spread quickly, though this time through official channels rather than leaked footage, and the reaction across allied systems shifted almost overnight from suspicion and speculation to something closer to genuine celebration. Human biology was no longer whispered about as a strange, potentially dangerous secret, but discussed openly as a remarkable discovery, one that opened new avenues for cooperation between species that had never before considered such possibilities. The king, true to his word, formally requested a full diplomatic exchange program between Earth and the Vecthari Ascendancy, one focused specifically on voluntary, consensual medical research and collaboration, with strict protections in place to ensure no human would ever again be treated as a resource rather than a person. I later learned that Earth's government, initially cautious about the entire situation, had grown increasingly supportive once it became clear the ascendancy intended to treat the exchange as a genuine partnership rather than an extraction of resources. I was asked, formally this time, whether I would be willing to stay on as an advisor to the new program, given my unique position at the very center of everything that had happened. I thought about my old life, the simple contract I had originally signed, the quiet, uneventful rotation I had once expected to complete before returning home. None of that felt like enough anymore. "I will stay," I said, for the second time in as many weeks, though this time the words carried a very different weight than they had in that cold examination room days earlier. The princess found me later that evening, standing near the same wide window where we had once sat together during the darkest moment of our shared ordeal, watching the stars drift slowly past in their endless, silent procession. "I heard you agreed to stay," she said, coming to stand beside me. "I did," I said. "It seemed like the right choice, given everything that has happened. And your old life? The simple contract, the quiet rotation you once told me you were looking forward to completing?" I considered the question for a moment before answering honestly. "I think that life ended the moment I slipped on that wet floor and grabbed your wrist instead of the railing. There is no going back to it now, not really, and strangely enough, I am not sure I want to." She was quiet for a long moment, studying the stars alongside me, her skin glowing steadily now, healthy and strong in a way it had not been since the day we first met. "My people have always believed touch carries meaning," she said finally. "That it is not something to be given carelessly or received without understanding its weight. I used to believe that meaning came from ceremony, from tradition, from the careful rules our society built around it. And now, she said, I think perhaps meaning comes from something simpler, from the choice to reach out toward another person, even when you do not fully understand what that choice might cost you, because some part of you believes it is worth doing anyway." I turned to look at her, struck by the quiet sincerity in her voice. "I did not choose to touch you, that first time. It was an accident." "No," she agreed. "But you chose to stay, you chose to return, again and again, allowing something as intimate as sustained contact with a stranger, simply because you believed it might save my life. That choice was not an accident, Daniel Hart. That was entirely yours." I did not have a ready response to that, so I simply stood beside her in comfortable silence, watching the stars continue their slow, endless drift beyond the window, the weight of everything that had happened over the past 2 weeks, finally settling into something that felt less like chaos and more like the beginning of an entirely new chapter. Somewhere out among those distant points of light, my own species was learning, for the first time, just how much of what we considered ordinary, unremarkable, barely worth a second thought, could mean everything to someone else entirely. A handshake, a touch on the shoulder, the simple, mundane chemistry of skin meeting skin, something so deeply human that none of us had ever thought to question it, had somehow become the foundation for an alliance between worlds. I thought about all the things we carried without ever realizing their worth, the quiet miracles hidden inside the most ordinary parts of being human, waiting patiently for the right accidental moment to reveal themselves. I had come to this station to fix a broken translator panel. I had never expected to leave it, having discovered something far more valuable, not just about the princess beside me or the ascendancy she would one day rule, but about my own species and everything we still had left to learn about ourselves. The stars continued their slow drift beyond the window, indifferent and endless, and for the first time since that alarm had first blared through the corridor weeks earlier, I felt something settle inside me that I could only describe as peace, fragile, but real, the quiet certainty that whatever came next, I would face it not as the nobody I had once believed myself to be, but as someone who had, in the smallest and most accidental of ways, changed the course of an entire alliance between worlds.